is not the best thing. I think Treasury bill normally is used for liquidity management, but when Treasury bill is now going to be the source of financing the budget, that is precarious, and we need to do something to arrest the situation.
The finance minister has laid out a strategy. I think now we know. One is the debt restructuring. We've done the domestic. We are now about to approach the foreigners, foreign debt holders to try and help us do this. He says fiscal adjustments will also be part of the equation. Everything else you've heard since this crisis started and attempt to deal with this matter, and now he came before Parliament today and sort of crystallize it all. Will that be enough to get us out of this in time, or does it all revolve around the executive board approval in March?
Well, everything has to be approved by the executive board. As to whether it is March or not, I can't tell. And I'm not also very clear in my mind whether we need both the domestic debt exchange program to be concluded as well as the external debt agreement that ought to be undertaken with bilateral debt holders and also some important institutions and countries such as China. So I do not know that they will treat the domestic debt program separate from that. If that is not the case, then I believe that we are going a long haul. And the debt exchange program alone should not be our focus, because whatever we do, if we do not grow the economy to a certain level, we will not be able to come out of our economic woes. So as we focus on the debt exchange program and some form of expenditure management, we also ought to focus on an aggressive, productive plan that will inure to the economy in terms of growth, that will be able to balance the economy, and we will be able to reverse or recover as quickly as possible. Growth is very, very cardinal in managing a crisis.
Thank you very much. That's the Dean of the Cape Coast University Business School, Professor John Gachi, on Newsnight in just over a minute. We'll have more on this because there's now Ghana's race against time to secure external debt restructuring as Finance Minister sends out urgent appeal to Parliament to assist meet IMF prior conditions to securing bailout. We'll also be hearing from President Akufo-Addo, who is wading into the Bawku Chieftaincy controversy, describing the enskinment of the new rival chief as a big crisis. Stay with us. On Newsnight tonight, President Akufo-Addo wades into Bawku Chieftaincy controversy, describing the enskinment of new rival chief as a big crisis, with the police still on the hunt for the newly installed chief.
We've come at unfortunately at a poor time for us. We have, first of all, a big crisis on our hands in Bawku as we're speaking right now.
We'll be live in Bawku tonight. Also tonight, Ghana's race against time to secure external debt restructuring, as Finance Minister sends out urgent appeal to Parliament to assist meet IMF prior conditions to securing a bailout.
I cannot emphasize enough the need to secure the board approval for our IMF program by the end of March 2023. I therefore entreat the House to prioritize approval of the outstanding revenue bills.
We have an update on Ghana's push to get bilateral and commercial creditors to agree to restructure our debt. Also tonight, Attorney General's office serves notice of initiating steps to amend portions of the Audit Service Act to bar the Auditor General from publishing his audit reports before Parliament looks at it.
If you look at that section, the other thing it cannot be published, but it should be published after Parliament. So there's a need for an amendment. But just be sure that it's until the constitutional provision.
We have details as the Center for Democratic Development serves notice they will resist this. In business,
government turns its attention to external creditors after closing a deal with domestic debt exchange program on the country going forward.
And in sports, assistant coach of the Black Stars, Masudi Dramani, has appealed to Ghanaians to be measured in the expectation of new coach Chris Hughton.
Also tonight, 10.7% of all teenage girls in Ghana got pregnant last year. That's about 102,000 teenagers countrywide.
The country recorded 10.7% of pregnancies among teenagers aged 15 and 19 in 2022.
We have more from a report by the Institute of Statistical, Social and Economic Research plus Child's Rights International has been warning this could even be the tip of an iceberg. Stay with us for more here on Newsnight. And you're live on Newsnight. It's on Joy 99.7 FM. Now, President Akufo-Addo has waded into the simmering chieftaincy controversy in Bawku, describing it as a big security crisis. Now, yesterday, the Mamprusi faction of the protracted Bawku conflict enskinned a new Bawku Naba, despite the recognition of Naba Asigiri Abugdago Azoka II by the government and the Upper East Regional House of Chiefs as the legitimate ruler of the area. Now, government has since condemned the act and has called on the security agencies to arrest all those behind the enskinment, including the man who has been enskinned himself. Now, the Member of Parliament for the area, Mahama Yariga, says Bawku is looking up to the government to act and bring peace.
Government has said that the act is criminal. Government has said that it doesn't recognize the act. Government has said that nobody can hold himself out as chief of Bawku other than Abugdago Azoka II. Government has said that the police should look out for anybody who carries himself about as a chief of Bawku other than Abugdago Azoka II, and that the police should arrest such a person. So government has said everything, and so everybody in Bawku is sitting quietly and watching government. I can assure you that since yesterday, my colleagues and I have done everything to maintain peace in the area. We've spoken severally. If you will notice, there's been no gunshot in Bawku since the event yesterday, thanks to the effort of the Bawku Naba himself, his elders, some of us, MPs, talking to our people and pleading with them and asking them to just sit and watch government enforce its laws and not take the law into their own hands. And so everybody is sitting and watching the government to see whether it will walk the talk. And if it doesn't walk the talk, then I can assure you that at a certain point, those of us holding the line might lose control. We don't want to lose control. We will continue to hold the line and plead with everybody to sit back and watch the government.
Well, the Commander-in-Chief of the Ghana Armed Forces, the President Akufo-Addo himself, has today been speaking about it, describing it as a major crisis.
You've come at unfortunately, at a poor time for us. We have, first of all, a big crisis on our hands in Bawku, as we're speaking right now. Things that happened there early this morning, which are causing a lot of problems for the security agencies. That's why I was late. I was in a meeting with them.
I'll take it to the region pretty shortly and speak to our correspondent who's been following what has been happening there today for us and bring us the very latest on this. Let's go to Albert Sorry, who joins us on the telephone line right now. Albert, yesterday the government ordered the arrest of the gentleman who was skinned. Do we have any updates on this?
Evans, so the whole day we've been monitoring the situation in Bawku to see if the chief who was installed yesterday will be brought into the town. As we speak, we haven't seen any sign of that. All our sources tell us they haven't seen any sign of him being brought into the Bawku township today. So at the moment, that is all the information we have.
The major fear.
And we don't also know his whereabouts at the moment.
The major fear yesterday, even among government circles, that triggered that statement was that this may trigger some disturbance in Bawku. What's the situation on the ground as we speak?
since yesterday, we've not heard of any disturbances. Activity and other things in the town have been normal today, except that for most people, when you speak to them, they are waiting to see what happens if they make any attempt to bring the newly installed chief into the township. So for many of the residents of Bawku, they feel that the disturbances may only come if there is any attempt to bring him into the township. But security are on the ground, and we are monitoring the situation to see what happens.
Thank you very much, Albert. I want to now speak to member of the Defense and Interior Committee in Parliament, who himself used to be a senior police officer. Peter Tobu joins us on the telephone line right now. Mr. Tobu, thank you for your time here on News 9. We just heard the president speak on this developing matter, describing it as a big security crisis. You heard him. Your reaction?
Thank you very much, Evans. Let me say good evening to you and good evening to our cherished listeners. It is a very bad day for me, being a member of Parliament, a member of the Defense and Interior Committee, and also a former police officer, understanding the security implications of what just happened. The president got it right when he expressed worry and making it very clear that this is a very serious security matter for the country to begin to have a second look at. I am rather very surprised that Bawku had been in the news for long. Government has committed so much resources to ensure that there is some semblance of peace in Bawku, so that we will look for a lasting solution to the Bawku crisis. It was in this period where there are a lot of soldiers in Bawku and a lot of police officers have been deployed in Bawku that the Minister for Defense, the Minister for Interior, His Excellency the President himself, they have said it clearly. Matter of chieftaincy in Bawku is a closed case. We've heard it. And in the last time, the Minister for Defense came to Parliament and told us that we should treat anything in Bawku as a pure criminal matter. That chieftaincy matter is closed in Bawku, and we all took it in good faith, only to just realize this morning that they have installed another chief. And skinning a chief for the people of Bawku by Nairi, which has been the bane of contention for years, shows that whatever government has told us, and we're trying to believe that the matter of chieftaincy in Bawku is over, is not the truth. There is something more. And some of us were believing that we need to have a national conversation about the Bawku issue. Let's raise it to the national level. It's no longer a Bawku matter. Let's make it a Ghana matter. And if we make it a Ghana matter, we can find some illustrious sons of this country with some pedigree to begin to look at the Bawku issue. Let's examine it. Let's analyze it. Let's find a solution to it.
Are you suggesting,
but we're led to believe that it is over.
We have a template there in the way the country dealt with the Dagbon crisis, where you had other eminent people from other parts of the country getting involved, and we've seen the achievement of peace in Dagbon. Are you suggesting a similar approach in Bawku?
Exactly. That is what I was looking at. I was probably looking at the head of the legislature, talking about the Speaker of Ghana's Parliament, that we represent the people. If the people are suffering, if the people are in conflict over decades and there is no solution, what can this huge organ of state, the Parliament of Ghana, do in finding a lasting solution to Bawku? I'm sure that the good offices of the Speaker of Parliament can be used by His Excellency the President with the support of state authority and the willingness of the political body in this country. I think we're able to find a lasting solution to the Bawku incident. But what happened is a total failure of intelligence. Because what is happening in Bawku, if people can still enskin a chief in the name of Bawku, wherever it is in this country, and in the period of the enskinment, it is a process. In the period of the enskinment, it is going to take an hour or two, and intelligence will not help us to just get there and nip it in the bud. I think that failure is telling, and it's quite unfortunate.
Thank you very much, Peter Tobu. He's a member of the Defense and Interior Committee in Parliament. He himself a senior police officer, former senior police officer in Bawku. This year alone has claimed at least 9 lives. There was a recent killing as well that moves the number way over 10. And the security agencies and the entire national security apparatus, including the Ghana Armed Forces, on the ground now on high alert following the enskinment of another chief yesterday. That individual who was skinned is now a wanted man, and the police are still in hand for him. It's a live on News Night. It's on Joy 99.7 FM. Now, with the domestic debt exchange program out of the way, it is now tonight a race against time to get Ghana's bilateral and commercial foreign creditors to also agree to restructure our debt. Ghana must meet 5 prior conditions agreed with the International Monetary Fund, IMF, before the country can access the critically needed $3 billion bailout. Time is now running out with the next IMF Executive Board meeting in March. Today, the Finance Minister, Akufo-Addo, was emphatic Parliament must play its part to satisfy that prior condition needed for the bailout.
Mr. Speaker, all these efforts will be greatly enhanced if the Income Tax Amendment Bill, the Excise Duty and Excise Tax Stamp Amendment Bills, as well as the Growth and Sustainability Levy Bill, which are outstanding in this August House, could be prioritized and passed. Mr. Speaker, the passage of these bills will enable government to complete 4 of the 5 agreed prior actions in the staff level agreement since tariff adjustment by the PURC, publication of the Auditor General's report on COVID-19 spending, and onboarding of GET Fund, DACF, and Road Fund on the GIVMIS have all been successfully completed. Mr. Speaker, I cannot emphasize enough the need to secure the board approval for our IMF program by the end of March 2023. I therefore entreat the House to prioritize approval of the outstanding revenue bills and the various concessional facilities so that we would ensure that the board meets successfully in March in Washington, and we also have the appropriate resources for growth from the facilities which are concessional.
Well, he gave the following update on Ghana's desperate attempt to get its bilateral and commercial foreign creditors to also agree to restructure the country's debt.
Mr. Speaker, this significant milestone of the success of the domestic debt exchange program would also build momentum for a external restructuring program, which has also commenced. As part of this progress, Ghana has officially asked its bilateral creditors for a debt treatment initiative under the G20 Common Framework. Consequently, Mr. Speaker, Ghana co-hosted a meeting with the Paris Club, including both Paris Club and non-Paris Club creditors, on 10th January 2023. We reiterated the requests for expedited treatment under the Common Framework and presented our economic and fiscal outlook, as well as taking so far with the DDEP. Most importantly, Mr. Speaker, we made it known that we expect the creditor committee to be formed in an expeditious way to facilitate the program to ensure that we are able to go to the fund board in March. We have started the process of negotiating in good faith with our commercial creditors. 2 preliminary discussions and exchange of information have started on a good footing with representative committees and advisors. The members have indicated their commitment to establish a creditor committee to assess Ghana's request for debt treatment under the Common Framework by end of February 2023. We hope, Mr. Speaker, our commercial creditors will understand our desire to negotiate with our bilateral creditors softer terms than the ones we anticipate to propose to them, as a speedy process with the bilateral creditors is needed to pave the way for the discussion with private creditors. Mr. Speaker, we are also approaching major creditors like India and China to ensure that our discussions with the Paris Club is accelerated. Mr. Speaker, we've also negotiated discussions with the representative of our international bond holders and their advisors. Substantive discussions are due to start with them in the weeks to come.
Well, in the last few days, there's been criticism directed at the government for overborrowing from the central bank, the Bank of Ghana. The finance minister today explained that Ghana's current situation is so dire that the Bank of Ghana has been forced to fund the budget.
Mr. Speaker, as already stated in the House in November, We did lose access to the international capital markets at the beginning of 2022. At the same time, budget implementation was confronted with domestic financing challenges from the auctions, as well as lower than estimated domestic revenue mobilization. This presented a very challenging macroeconomic environment during 2022, leading to a widened financing gap of the budget, and therefore became necessary for the Bank of Ghana to fund shortfalls at the auction market to avoid disorderly default and prevent a deeper crisis. Mr. Speaker, it was necessary for the government to seek financing from the Bank of Ghana to augment its fiscal operations for the year. The Bank of Ghana last week concluded work on its financial accounts for 2022 and reports that the total overdraft extended to government for 2022 was 37.9 billion. Mr. Speaker, in line of Section 30, Clause 6 of the Bank of Ghana Act 2022, Act 612, I'm using this platform to inform the legislature of the financing of the budget by the Bank of Ghana. The domestic debt exchange exercise and the external debt restructuring program will make such financing unnecessary going forward in 2023 and beyond.
Let's bring in Professor Bawku, the Professor of Finance at the University of Ghana, joins us on the telephone line right now. Prof, thanks for your time here on Newsnight.
Yes, good evening, Evans, and good evening to our individual bondholders.
And Prof, today the Finance Minister is now, clearing the path now that they've done with the domestic debt exchange program, focusing now on the next big hurdle, getting our foreign creditors to agree to restructure. And he says something, quote, the members have, this is the members of the creditor committee, have indicated their commitment to establish a creditor committee to assess Ghana's request for debt treatment under the common framework by end of February 2023. Will this be enough to pave way for an executive board approval in March? And is this time frame even realistic?
Yes, thank you very much, Ivan. Typically, it's easier restructuring the domestic debt, and we have seen what happened. Within 2 months, essentially, government was done. It's also because of the divide and rule approach, because the domestic creditors couldn't form one committee in order to negotiate from position of strength. But that same strategy will not work with our international creditors or external creditors. That won't work. So, in response to your question, there is a high possibility that the IMF will give us a program end of Q1, because without that, with the dwindling international reserves, the country will be exposed and the city may come under cumulative pressure. So there's a high possibility that the IMF will give us a program even before the completion of the external debt restructuring. Why am I saying so? With the external debt, particularly when it comes to Euro bonds and the rest of them, look, it's not going to be that simple, because, in the case of the domestic debt exchange, because we didn't have a unified front, we couldn't negotiate from position of strength. We even didn't ask for the debt sustainability analysis, the projections, the assumptions, to interrogate it. But when it comes to the external debt, they will demand all those things. They will validate the assumptions underlying the debt sustainability analysis, jointly done by the IMF and the World Bank. They will demand all of that. They will validate. They will look at the projection. They will look at the fiscal outlook. They will look at all those things before they will come on board. And therefore, if we are saying that we will have to complete that one before IMF will give us a program, that will be as difficult as asking fish to climb the tree. Okay, so chances are that the board will give us a program while negotiations are or continue for the restructuring of the external debt. Look, Evans, the other thing to also note is that, government focus on the external debt is elevated now because government didn't get exactly what they had wanted from the domestic debt exchange. If you look at the original memorandum announced on December 5th, and the universe of eligible bonds, and at that time, pensions were included and all of that. Now that they've excluded all of that, in excess of 30 billion and all of that, government got something lower than what they had anticipated. Actually, with the various amendments, which is good for the stability of the financial sector and the economy as a whole, how much banks, insurance companies, securities firms saved is how much government had to give up. So in closing the gap from the domestic debt exchange, we made progress, but that was a bit limited. And therefore, there's the need for external debt restructuring to be elevated. Beyond that, there will also be a need for some level of fiscal adjustment, expenditure-based adjustment, together with what they have gained from the domestic debt exchange and then the external, in order to work more towards achieving the debt sustainability by 2028, essentially bringing our debt to GDP ratio in present value terms from where it is now to 55%. Remember, when the IMF completed their debt sustainability, somewhere maybe October there, but from October to now, the depreciation of the cedi has added significantly to the debt stock. And because the debt sustainability analysis essentially uses a discount rate of just 5%, the difference between the nominal and the present value terms is not that much. So our debt to GDP ratio in present value terms now is more than 110%.
Wow.
Now, if you work with that, hello?
Yes.
Evans, if you work with that and you want to achieve debt sustainability, bring it down to 55% in 5 years, then you need to do a primary balance of not less than 12%. That will be too much for the fiscal alone to contribute. And that is why the debt restructuring is very key. You also heard the chair of Finance Committee in Parliament saying that domestic debt exchange is not enough, debt restructuring is not enough. Yes, he's right, because we knew this long ago. And that is why we have spoken earlier about the triangle approach to restoring debt sustainability, essentially involving fiscal adjustment, structural adjustment, and debt restructuring.
Yeah, and Prof, you just made that point about Kweku Kwatin's sessions today. And for those who did not hear, I want to bring that sound for them to listen to. And I'm also being joined by the ranking on the Mines and Energy Committee in Parliament. He himself is a politician, and Kweku Kwatin was clear that charity must begin at home amongst the MPs themselves and the executive. Hello, John Junapo. Thank you for your time here on Newsnight. Hello, Mr. Junapo. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great to have you. This is Kweku Kwatin speaking today on the floor of Parliament.
Mr. Speaker, debt treatment and the domestic debt exchange program, as has been deployed by government, is good, but it is not enough. Mr. Speaker, the state of our economy now would require more than a debt treatment. Mr. Speaker, not only should we support government to cut the interest commitments in our economy, we must pursue an aggressive program to rein in expenditure. And we must do that not just for today, we must do that going forward, Mr. Speaker. I dare say, Mr. Speaker, that in doing this, and I speak not just to the executive, I also speak to ourselves as members of Parliament. In cutting expenditure, charity must begin at home, and we must lead by example. Mr. Speaker, how many times have we not heard the people who elected us into office say that they have issues with the V8 that we use? How many times have we not heard our people complain about the expression we take? Mr. Speaker, I'm making the point, Mr. Speaker, that the problem we have on our hands today is not just a debt treatment matter. There is a need to deal with a fundamental weakness that has characterized the management of our economy for decades. We are reaping what we have sought as leaders, as governments, and as a people.
Mr. Junapo, do you agree with your colleague?
Absolutely. But it doesn't end there. Why should a minister be given a V8 just like that of an MP? What does the minister do that the MP doesn't do that requires that the state would buy a V8 for a minister, a V8 and a saloon car for a deputy minister, fuel it, provide them with all those perks, and yet the MP doesn't benefit from that? So it must cut across. Why should a DC, who is below the pecking order of a minister, an MP, be given all those perks when an MP doesn't even get a quarter of it? So I agree that we must cut costs, but that cost should cut across, right from the executive through to the judiciary to parliament. If it means that all of us, not just MPs, all arms of government ought to sacrifice in order to restore this country to macroeconomic stability, I am for it all. Because even this debt exchange, and Prof was making the analysis, they were looking at 137. 137. Eventually, they've had to go down to 97 and succeeded with just 82. So even if you look at the domestic debt exchange alone, the original program in terms of the quantum and even the 0%, 5%, and graduating into 2027, it has been a monumental failure in my opinion. Now they are yet to go and deal with the external. And so we are not out of the woods yet. We still have a lot to do. And I think that government officials and the finance minister in particular ought to communicate with extreme caution.
Today, he had a special appeal to Parliament that you can assist him get the executive board approval by passing a number of bills. That is part of the prior conditions that we agree with the IMF to get the board approval. And he was asking that you expedite the passage of these bills. This is the passage of the prior actions. It includes they've done the tariff adjustment, and I heard you mention that first, that it was part of an IMF conditionality. But he wanted to pass the income tax amendment bill, excise duty, excise tax stamp bills, and two others. Is he going to get that support?
He ought to show faith. He ought to show good faith, first of all. This is the finance minister who stated in the budget that as part of the domestic debt exchange program, he would consult stakeholders who matter. Until Parliament itself summoned the finance minister, he never thought it even wise to appear before Parliament or even the finance committee to at least get our input into this whole domestic debt exchange program. And so the finance minister himself ought to demonstrate good faith, ought to respect Parliament and consult Parliament so that all of us can build consensus as to how we can take this country out of this economic quagmire that we find ourselves. Because every now and then, even as he keeps assuring, the situation keeps exacerbating, the currency keeps falling, and the problem keeps compounding. I think that the finance minister should know that knowledge does not reside only with him, and that he alone doesn't have the solutions to the myriad of problems that we are faced with. And that if he consults further and engages with Parliament and other stakeholders, we would be able to find a solution to this problem.
John Junapo, thank you very much. I still have Professor Godfrey Bokwin with me, and still on the subject of cutting. Prof, I know you are a friend of organized labor. The Kweku Kwarteng, who you mentioned earlier, also had a word for organized labor.
But Mr. Speaker, it's not just the politician that must lead by example. Our friends in labor must moderate the demand for increased wages. We must know that government expenditure can come from nowhere but either taxation or from borrowing. And when we put pressure on political leadership, the consequence is what we see before us today. We are never going to address the problem on our hands by pointing political fingers at our opponents and hoping that when we come to power, that we will do any better if the fundamental weaknesses continue to exist. Mr. Speaker, in conclusion on the debt, on the expenditures, we must simply stop distributing wealth we have not created. We must stop spending money that we do not have.
Professor Bawku, as a friend of organized labor, what's your reaction to that admonition to organized labor? Don't demand things you know you can get.
Evans.
Yes, Prof.
You know what? At the beginning, I was a bit emotional towards the end of last year. But now, the message is coming home. Now, both sides of the political divide are coming to the realization that there is a need for us to build consensus around expenditure cuts. That is good news. We have said this long ago. Why are we saying so? And we have said that, even I will not avoid your question on the labor. I will address that. We have said that an IMF program alone is not enough. Ghana's problem is bigger than IMF-supported program. We need serious governance reforms. We need serious structural reforms that must underpin our inclusive productivity growth and economic transformation. We need that. We must be willing to pay that price today to have a future we all can be proud of. We need to do that. And look, it must cut across. I agree. And then when you come to labor and you come to the wage bill, we must be more keen about addressing wage inequality within the wage bill. Even as we speak, more than 80% of the public sector workers, a little less than 700,000, they earn less than 3,000 Ghana cedis a month. Even more than 80% of the public sector workers, they earn less than 3,000 Ghana cedis a month. Look at that in dollar terms. How much is that? Okay, so if you're asking these people to cut something, what do you want them to cut? Life itself? Okay, so the wage bill is an issue. The productivity issues have to be addressed. But more importantly, we must look at wage inequality within that, so that together, and I believe that we can have a national conversation on all of this and look at it from different angles. This is not something that should be to the bosom of, let's say, the executive or something. Where Ghana has reached, we need to build consensus across the political divide, across religious divide, CSOs, academics. We need that. The media, we need that. If we get to a point and realize that when you are confronted with the data, you will be willing to cede something for the common good. That is where we should be heading towards. And I'm looking, it should not end here. You know, we have done restructuring before. Some other people had to pay that price because then our debt were hugely in the form of multilateral and bilateral. But now, because of the commercial component, individual bondholders and the rest of them, it has generated a lot of discussion. And now we must leverage on this to institutionalize reforms, amend the constitution. We need to do that like yesterday. Look, and whilst we do so, we build institutional independence. Look, Evans, in less than 1 year, Bank of Ghana has given Ghana government more money than the IMF will give us over a 3-year period. Check the data.
Yeah.
In return for nothing. No fiscal reform, no structural reform, no demand. But the IMF gives us $3 billion, and there are a host of reforms that we have to implement. Part of them we even have to do it before the program kicks in. That is what they call prior actions. Look at how much Bank of Ghana has given to Ghana government.
Yeah,
and
for
what? Of course, we knew that we got to a point because, in fact, actually, the minister said from the beginning of 2022, no, actually, Ghana lost market access in the third quarter of 2021. And from there, the problem became exposed. And that is why we told, and we will still say it, that Honorable Minister of Finance failed this country. It was when the market rejected us in the third quarter of 2021 as a leader and taking a proactive measure. That was when you should have made the call to the IMF. At that time, the Article 4 surveillance was almost concluding that Ghana's debt was sustainable. If we had made an application to the IMF in the third quarter, or even using the 2022 budget, when it was presented in November 2021 as an occasion to announce our intent to go to the IMF, we would have avoided this economic mess.
have to pay the price we are paying now.
Yeah, Prof, I'm grateful for your thoughts on this matter. Prof says he's no longer emotional, and I'm grateful that he can express his thoughts now that the members of parliament themselves, the chairman of the finance committee, is now admonishing his own colleagues and the executive to cut. And later after business, 10.7% of all teenage girls in Ghana got pregnant last year. That's about 102,000 teenagers countrywide. We'll have details of that for you. Plus, the new consumer protection law in the offing. Details of that after George. Hello, George. What's in business?
Well, a lot is happening in business, Evans, and coming up, government turns attention to external creditors after closing some discussions on the domestic debt exchange program. And oil marketing firms a hint of more reduction in prices of petroleum products should the city remain fairly stable. The business news on Newsnight is brought to you by MTN Business. Welcome to the new world of business. Allianz Live and Ghana Pay. Welcome back to Business on Newsnight. Now, government says it is now turning its attention to external creditors after what it describes as concluding discussions on the domestic debt exchange program with local bondholders. The Finance Minister Akufo-Addo disclosed this today when he addressed Parliament on the program. He has been giving details on discussions on the debt cancellation with the country's bilateral partners.
That we expect the creditor committee to be formed in an expeditious way to facilitate the program to ensure that we are able to go to the fund board in March. The members have indicated their commitment to establish a creditor committee to assess Ghana's request for debt treatment under the common framework by end of February 2023. We hope, Mr. Speaker, our commercial creditors will understand our desire to negotiate with our bilateral creditors softer terms than the ones we anticipate to propose to them, as a speedy process with the bilateral creditors is needed to pave the way for the discussion with private creditors. Mr. Speaker, we are also approaching major creditors like India and China to ensure that our discussions with the Paris Club is accelerated. Mr. Speaker, we've also negotiated discussions with the representative of our international bond holders and their advisors. Substantive discussions are due to start with them in the weeks to come.
Meanwhile, the minister has also been making an appeal to Parliament to pass some tax measures that will help in actually going to the IMF for a program, as well as improve the revenue situation for the country.
Mr. Speaker, all these efforts will be greatly enhanced if the income tax amendment bill, the excise duty and excise tax stamp amendment bills, as well as the growth and sustainability levy bill, which are outstanding in this August House, could be prioritized and passed. Mr. Speaker, the passage of these bills will enable government to complete 4 of the 5 agreed prior actions in the staff level agreement.
And that is the Finance Minister, Ken Ofori-Atta. Expect more reductions in the prices of petroleum products in the coming weeks. That is, if the Ghana cedi remains fairly stable on the market. Who are those making this projection? There is more in this report.
Some of the oil marketing companies. They argue that one of the major reasons for the reduction in price at the pumps that began today was as a result of Ghana cedi stability. Therefore, if this trend should continue together with fairly stable prices of petroleum products on the international market, then consumers will continue to enjoy some lower prices at the pumps. Government, on the other hand, believes that, together with its Gold for Oil program, we could witness some significant reduction in prices of petroleum products from next month.
And that is a Business Desk report. Meanwhile, despite the reduction in the price of diesel and petrol, LPG will, however, not be changed. This is the second time this year that the price has been kept unchanged. Gabriel Kumi is Vice President of the LPG Marketers Association.
It's unfortunate that the LPG price could not go down in line with the general downward trend that petroleum prices has taken. And this is so because the international crude oil price for finished product of LPG did not go down. We have been receiving quotes from the BDCs, and our checks indicate that the LPG has gone up by about 8 to 10% beginning today. So we have no other option than to pass that to the consumer, because the cost price of the product has gone up. For the past window, we're buying a kilo of LPG at about 13 cedis per kilo. But beginning today, we are going to buy it at 14 cedis 50 pesos.
Gabriel Kumi is the Vice President of the LPG Marketers Association. The Energy Ministry has formally written to the bulk oil storage transportation company to deal with supply disruptions in Bupe and Kumasi. It follows what the ministry describes as low level of petroleum product stocks in Kumasi and Bupe Depot, as well as the Bono East region. The ministry, in this said letter seen by Joy Business, describes the situation as critical, hence the need for this action. Now, telecoms company Airtel Tigo, as part of its commitment in supporting the health and well-being of Ghanaians, has donated medical equipment and supply to sickle cell unit at the Kolebu Teaching Hospital. The donation is in line with the Airtel Tigo's Touching Lives sickle cell disease, which seeks to support persons living with the disease. There is more in this report.
As the world marks Valentine's Day, a day set aside for the celebration of love and affection, Airtel Tigo has donated medical equipment and supplies to the Ghana Institute of Clinical Genetics at the Kolebu Teaching Hospital. The gesture is to show love to people living with the sickle cell disease. The medical equipment donated include infrared vein finders, mobile oxygen cylinders, and many others. CEO of Airtel Tigo, Leo Scalatos, indicated that the primary objective of the initiative is to enhance the lives of individuals who are living with sickle cell disease.
Since 2022, Airtel Tigo, through its corporate social responsibility, Airtel Tigo Touching Lives Sickle Cell Edition, has sought to educate and raise awareness of sickle cell while improving the lives of those affected by it. We partnered with the International Sickle Cell Center, an organization made up of medical practitioners and activists, to develop a series of educational materials and blog posts on sickle cell disease.
The director of the sickle cell unit at Kolebu, Dr. Ama Akwesikuma, stated that the donation from Airtel Tigo was very timely.
Well, Evans, and tonight on PM Express, we're talking about the Gold for Oil program and whether that is the solution to the high prices of petroleum products that we are experiencing currently. There have been several arguments put forward about what this program is supposed to do, but is it achieving the set results and the concerns that players in the industry have expressed about this product? So I'll be engaging the Deputy Minister of Energy, Andre Japamesa, on PM Express at 9 p.m. So you can join us, Evans.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just looking forward to one answer. When will I see the direct result in the tank when I buy it at the pumps?
Okay.
Asking for me.
Okay, so at 9 p.m. and all our social media platforms, remember to join us for PM Express Business Edition with the Deputy Minister of Energy, Andre Japamesa, as you talk about the Gold for Oil program, solution to high fuel prices in Ghana. More tonight.
You're still listening to News 90 on Joy 99.7 FM, and tonight government is finalizing a new consumer protection bill that will grant greater protection to consumers as they go about their activities dealing with firms and companies and buying products. That document will be sent to Cabinet for approval. The Trade and Industry Ministry is leading that initiative. We can speak now to the Caretaker Sector Minister, John Abdullahi Jinapo, who joins us on the line. Samuel Abdullahi Jinapo, who joins us on the telephone line right now. Mr. Jinapo, thank you for your time here on Newsnight.
Thank you for having me, Evans, and good evening to your listeners.
Why has this become necessary?
Well, first of all, as you may be aware, in many jurisdictions, consumer protection is a very important aspect of their national line. If you go to Australia, for example, they have the Australian Competition and Consumer Act. If you go to Canada, they have the Canadian Consumer Protection Act, and UK and several, South Africa, Kenya, and the rest. But Ghana, we do not have a single composite legislation which is geared towards protecting the rights of consumers. And we do not have the institutional framework to protect the rights of consumers. And President Akufo-Addo and his government are taking the view that it's about time that we promulgate a piece of legislation which will have the exclusive overarching goal of protecting the rights of consumers. And I'm not going to belabor the point on the lacuna or the vacuum when it comes to consumer rights protection. I'm sure we are all very familiar with this, and many of us have examples of how we procured goods and services, and our rights have been trampled upon, and yet we do not have the requisite statutory framework to assert our rights and seek remedy. And we do not have an institution we can go to. So these are the steps we are taking to ultimately have a consumer protection bill and eventually act, and have an institution which is solely and exclusively mandated to ensure consumer protection in our country, so that we can also be in accord with the best international practices when it comes to the protection of consumer rights.
I mean, why haven't we had this before, and what timelines are you working with to have this passed by Parliament?
It's been work in progress. A lot of work has gone into it already. In the month preceding my assumption of responsibility as a caretaker minister for trade and industry. But we're trying to expedite action on it. And so, God willing, this week we're taking a memorandum to Cabinet, and I'm not sure we will have difficulties in Cabinet. And thereafter, we hope to be able to spearhead the passage of this legislation in this meeting of Parliament.
And will this come with a cost? Are you creating another bureaucracy as a result of this? And some may question if that is something that we need at a time of economic crisis.
Well, I think those are matters that the Ministry of Finance will have to look at. But first things first, I mean, the most important thing is to get a cabinet approval, and secondly, to pass the legislation in Parliament. The mechanics of setting up an institution to deal with this very important matter, I believe between the Ministry of Trade and the Ministry of Finance, they'll work it out. But in austere times, I believe that there can be, nuanced approaches of dealing with it without an unnecessary burden on the public exchequer. But I want to believe that most of us will appreciate that this is quite important, and that is why government is taking these steps.
Thank you very much. That's Samuel Abu Jinapo. He is the caretaker minister for trade and industry, pushing the passage of a consumer protection bill that may go to Parliament next week. Let's do sports now, and I am looking forward to my own personal selfish game later tonight, but I know Ms. Bao has something more for you. Hello, Ms. Bao.
Yes, Evans, I'm sure you're talking about the game between Barcelona and Manchester United. Second half just underway. Still 0-0 at the moment. Yes.
Say that again.
It's still 0-0.
The game has already started?
Already started. It has started.
Really?
Yeah, it started.
After 7.
Oh, no, it started
What time
early.
did it start?
It started, I think, 5:45 thereabout.
Oh, goodness me.
Yeah, so second half is underway, 0-0 at the moment in that Europa League fixture. But Black Stars assistant coach Masudi Dramani is the one entreating Ghanaians to be merged in the expectation for the national team following the appointment of Chris Hughton as the team's head coach. Of course, you remember Chris Hughton was recently appointed by the Ghana Football Association to replace Akufo-Addo, who left following the Black Stars 2022 FIFA World Cup campaign. Well, the assistant coach of the Black Stars says Chris Hughton, despite his experience with the English Premier League sides, he still need time to gel.
We have to be very modest in terms of our expectations, and then support and align, especially our huge industry, which is the media point, that we need to have a clear view of how we are rolling things, so that you'll be able to see that, okay, this is where we are, this is where we are going, we want to go, but these are the things that we need to be doing. And the good thing is that we have a strong database, and that's why when I was talking about the John Pinsley issue, I was saying that some players, you need them now. Some players you need them in the medium phase. Some players you need them in the longer term. And in the process of team building, that's how it's going to be. Some are going to be falling off. Some will fall off so early. But others are the ones that you are carrying for longer periods. So how do you do to be able to have them consistently be part of it? And it's about having at least a collection of 50 to 55 players where you know that always the revolving is going to come out from this group. And once you have that one, then you are building a strong team.
So that's assistant coach of the Black Stars, Masudi Dramani. He's been speaking to my colleague Muftau Nabila Abdullahi, and that interview will air full on AM show tomorrow on Joy News channel.
Thank you very much, Bao, there with sports. Well, tonight, 10.7% of all teenage girls in Ghana got pregnant last year. That's about 102,000 teenagers countrywide. That's according to the research that has been released today by the Institute of Statistical, Social and Economic Research in the latest report that disclosed that this is one of the key issues now affecting teenagers across the country. Well, listen to Dr. Martha Awo with the head of social division of ISA, giving details of this research.
The country recorded 10.7% of pregnancies among teenagers aged 15 and 19 in 2022. The same data at the regional level shows that Northeast leads at 15%, followed by Upper East at 14.2% and OT at 13.8%. The situation in these regions were the same, with just about 1% higher in 2021. Adolescent pregnancies are more common in marginalized areas and are often caused by poverty, limited employment opportunities, and lack of education.
Well, explaining the impact, Executive Director of the Population Council, Dr. Leticia Pia, said it directly results in a higher rate of school dropouts in basic and senior high schools because they're not psychologically strong enough to stay in school.
The link between teenage pregnancy and school dropout is very alarming. Research shows a direct relationship between school dropout and pregnancy among teenagers. This is because teenagers...
Apologies there for the repetition of that sound. Also, Program Officer for the Family Health Division of the Safe Motherhood added that more than 7,000 abortions were committed by teenage girls in 2022.
About 55% of pregnancies are unintended among adolescents, aged between the ages of 15 and 19 years. And this is more often unsafe in low middle income countries. As per what we have in the data, we know that we are in the range of 7,000 to 8,000 per year. And last year, we recorded 7,617 abortions in the age category of 10 to 19 years.
A lot there to chew on with what has happened with the teenage girls. 10.7% of all teenage girls got pregnant last year. That's a story you can find on myjoyonline.com. Read more about that and all the other stories here